I'm going to ask you to go back to a time when there were no snowdrops in this garden. A bit of history, I hope, will give you context and be of interest as we go round. My father-in-law, John Hare, fell in love with and bought Cottage Farm during the first election campaign after the war in 1945. He bought the wooded hill next to it, which is now the Blakenham Woodland Garden, in 1951. He had long coveted it. This is where he got seriously stuck into gardening. It was a great solace to him in the trials and tribulations of a successful but stormy and difficult political life. To his surprise, John discovered that there was a decent layer of green sand on top of the chalk, his new wood, which allowed him to plant the kinds of acidic-loving plants like azalea, rhododendron and magnolia, which usually fare miserably in the alkaline soil of this part of Suffolk. One of the most precious and poignant aspects of the garden is it's a map of friendships and relationships. My father-in-law's relationships, and then the friendships and relationships built up since then by my lovely husband Michael and myself. When John left politics in 1982, he redoubled his efforts in the garden. The rhododendrons and azaleas came from the gardens at Windsor, where his friend Sir Eric Savile was rector, and more from the great garden at Bodden, owned by his old friend George Aberconway. When Michael and I first came here, I remember the head gardener of the time, Walter Barton, a nice but very daunting character, saying, "You won't grow here," when I suggested planting a yew hedge around the swimming pool. Well, that turned out to be not quite true. The rolling yew hedges, with their balls bouncing along them, are getting increasingly difficult even to reach. Since then, of course, there's been other change. John Blakenham liked things to be neat and tidy. The woodland floor, under his management, was trimmed to the ground after the bluebells had flowered. I like wildflowers, and Michael was a tremendous environmentalist. Since then, we've tried to achieve a tricky balance of encouraging the kind of wildflowers whilst waging a constant battle on goosegrass and ground elder. Michael was chairman of Kew and a keen buyer at their annual sale of rare shrubs and specimens from all over the world. There are now more than 25 varieties of magnolia in the wood. The landscape features influenced in particular by our own close friendship with Maggie Keswick-Jenks and her husband Charles and their garden at Portrack in Scotland. They showed us what fun you could have with a digger, or in their case, with an army of diggers. Michael saw that there was a perfect circle of sycamores in a rather boring bit of the wood. We decided to dig a tilting helter-skelter, or whirlpool, into it. I worked out with a clay model exactly how we could do that without having to take away soil, or add any, or disturb any trees. We dug an amphitheatre into the bank of the garden near the house, where we can have outdoor performances, and we do. It is overlooked by one of the Chinese rock finds. From below, walking up to the amphitheatre, you look straight through the centre of the stone to the sky. These rocks we added into the woodland garden came from China. Charles Jenks' son Justin was the youngest foreigner allowed to run a business in China at the time. He was 18. Justin tracked down rocks buried near Lake Taihu, which is a big lake near Suzhou. The rocks have been dug up from there for millennia to feature as miniature mountains in classical Chinese gardens. The easy bit was getting them shipped to Gravesend. The harder bit was to install them without losing too much of their shape underground. It's true of all the garden though. All of the shrubs and trees we have had exotic adventures from all over the world to reach us and arrive in this one small garden in Suffolk. When we came to the garden in 1982, there were just two small patches of snowdrops, one in the spinney and one in the woodland garden. 15 years ago, we started to split these and were amazed at how rapidly they took to being split and spread.
Mary Keane, another great gardener and friend, gave me some Galanthus alwizii Sam Arnott, and we were off. Just look at the snowdrops in the wood now, and the variety of snowdrops, which to my shame I'm not on top of at all. I'm a galanthophile groupie, nowhere near proficient enough to count myself as the real thing. Such an enjoyable world to belong to, even as a humble admirer. John Morley, the artist and snowdrop specialist, is a trustee of the Blakenham Woodland Trust and has introduced me to the most wonderful snowdrops and collectors of snowdrops. He himself is an immortal, one of the most distinguished few who have a snowdrop named after them. Of course, what makes snowdrops even more esoteric is it is difficult to see into them, even to identify. If you see a bunch of people at a garden opening on their knees, turning the snowdrop flower head up gently between their fingers to look into them, they are probably galanthophiles. The success of the snowdrops has made us think harder about other wintering flowering plants. We've planted shrubs like camellias, daphne, winter sweet, winter honeysuckle, staphylococcus of course, all of them seductively fragrant winter plants. We were very lucky that Thompson and Morgan handed over a considerable collection of hellebores when they decided to discontinue doing trials on them. We commissioned Lily Green to compose a piece especially for the garden based on the ambient sound, mainly birdsong, you hear in the wood. The idea was that it would switch on from an abandoned piano as if by magic when you turned the corner of a path. Thinking of magic, a lot of people think of this place as their own magic garden, somewhere you find through a gate in a field, unattached to any house or building. Who is looking after it? The phrase from Genesis about God walking through the garden in the cool of the day often comes to my mind when I lift the latch and walk into its peace and otherworldliness.